It's Tim and Tammy time. And what are we doing here?
I don't know.
We're at Lake Bottom.
We're at Lake Bottom Park right now.
And we're here to discuss the stocking Strangler.
Look at the camera when you say that.
And, well, you're just sitting here, like one of those characters on Slapped Ham that just all of a sudden got still.
Okay.
But anyway, please like and subscribe and join our channel, please.
Okay. And I'm going to tell the story of Carlton Gary, the Columbus stocking strangler, the man who terrorized the elderly female population between 77 and 78.
We're doing it here because this is kind of the area that he stayed in.
So between the years of 1977 and 1978, the Columbus area around this park, a couple blocks off in other directions, but still around this park, there was a serial killer. And he eluded police. They didn't really catch on to him very quickly here in Columbus. However, they finally did catch up to him. But this is the story of Carlton Michael Gary. He was a young man. He was born in Columbus in 1950. He was raised here. He went to Carver High School and he went to Spencer High School. When he was 16, he and his mother moved to Fort Myers, Florida, and then to Gainesville, Florida. And it was while he lived there, he lived in a single parent household, and he spent a lot of his time here in Columbus with, I think, 2 aunts. But he lived in a single parent household, and while he was in Florida, he started to get in trouble. And these were petty crimes. He broke into cars. He was charged with arson. He started a fire, evidently, in Gainesville, Florida. And then he was arrested for assaulting a police officer. In 1970, he lived in Albany, New York, and there were 2 women whose houses were robbed, Nellie Farmer and Marion Fisher, who were found. They were raped, they were robbed, and they were strangled with stockings in Albany, New York. And when Carlton Gary was arrested for these crimes, he laid the blame on somebody else, and the other person was actually sent to prison for the murder, and he was only sent to prison for the robbery. I don't even think he was accused for the rape, but he was sent to prison for the robbery. And he was sent to prison, and then he was paroled. And then he was sent back to jail for breaking parole. And then he was paroled a year later. And then he got out of prison, he was released, and he moved to Syracuse. In 1977, in January 2nd, 1977, Jean Frost was raped and nearly choked to death in her home in Syracuse, New York. And Gary had a watch. He took a watch from that home, and they found him later with that watch. And he blames another man for the assault and the murder. But he's charged with possessing stolen property. He's put in jail, and then he escapes. He escapes from New York's Onondaga County Prison by jumping from a 3rd floor window. When he escapes from that prison, he comes back to Columbus. He comes straight back to Columbus. In September of 1977, he's only been out of prison. He escaped from prison in August of 77. September 11th, 1977, Gertrude Miller is found beaten, raped, and strangled with her own stocking in her home. In 1986, she is the witness who identifies Carlton Gary as her rapist. 1 week later, on September the 16th, 1977, Mary Willis Fern Jackson is found beaten, raped, and murdered with a stocking tied around her neck. And then her car is found near Fisk Avenue, which is where Carlton Gary lived. September the 24th. This makes 3 murders in 1 month in 1977. Jean Dimenstein is found raped and strangled with a stocking. And later, tests matched Gary's DNA to crime scene evidence. So, Jean Dimenstein is the third victim here in Columbus. She's raped, beaten, and found with a stocking tied around her neck to strangle her. That was the third murder in 1 month's time. In between these murders, there are robberies. And one of the robberies that was important was in October of 1977. It took place on Eberhart Avenue, and two sisters, their house was burglarized, and one of them's son was visiting, and the intruder stole the Toyota, the car, and it had a .22 caliber Ruger pistol under the seat. And then the car was abandoned on University Road. Now that pistol is going to come into play later because it's also going to be evidence linking back. The fourth victim was Florence Scheibel, and she was raped and strangled with a stocking. And Gary's right thumbprint, this is it right, Gary's right thumbprint was found on the door frame leading into her bedroom. Okay, Gary gets a job at the foundry, at Golden's Foundry, but then he quits that job and he leaves and he goes right back to robbing, stealing. The next victim in December of 1977 is Kathleen Woodruff. She's also found beaten, raped, and strangled with a stocking. And Gary's right little fingerprint is found on the aluminum window screen where the intruder entered the house. And then his palm print was found on the windowsill, just inside. The next victim was a survivor. She survived Gary's attack. It was Ruth Schwab, and she hit the panic button. He did rape her, and he was in the process of strangling her when the police came, but she hit a panic button, and neighbors called the police. The next victim was Mildred Borum. She lived about 2 blocks from Ruth Schwab's house, and she was raped and strangled. But she was strangled with a cord cut from the window blind. She was not strangled with a stocking. Final victim was Janet Coffin. She was found raped and strangled. All of these women attended church. We're going to talk about what they had in common. All of these women attended church at Winton United Methodist Church on Winton Road. I have to feel like they knew each other, but they were all widows. Their husbands had all died, and they lived alone. And this predator preyed on weak. They were old. They were 60 to 89. They were all older, and he preyed on the weakness that they were there alone, and he used that to his advantage. And he would come in their house, and then he would do what he wanted to. Well, in 1978, in April 1978, when the final victim, before he left this area, he changed over and he robbed Burger King on Macon Road. The same day he killed Janet Coffer, he robbed Burger King on Macon Road. Then he robbed the Hungry Hunter, Midtown Drive, and then Western Sizzlin on Victory Drive. In late September 1978, Carlton Gary left the Columbus area and he went to Greenville, South Carolina, where he robbed steakhouse after steakhouse. And he earned the nickname the Steakhouse Bandit. He was apprehended in Greenville, South Carolina, and he was convicted of armed robbery. And then in 1984, he escaped, came back to Columbus. Then he began to rob places in Columbus, and then he robbed in Gainesville, Florida, and he robbed in Montgomery, Alabama. He just basically became more of a petty thief. In May of 1984, the authorities here in Columbus had enough evidence finally to go and pick Carlton Gary up. So they went to Albany, Georgia, and they picked him up. He was put in jail, and he did try to escape from prison here in 1985 from jail. But he didn't escape this time. And when he goes to trial, He's found guilty on 3 counts. They only charged him with 3 counts of murder. They only charged him with 3 of the women's murders. But during the case of the trial, they connected all 6 murders to Carlton. Gertrude Miller testified against him. She pointed him out as her rapist. She saw him on television and she identified him. She looked through the books the police showed her and she identified him. In 1986, Carlton Gary is sentenced to death on 3 counts of murder. And when asked why he wasn't charged with all 6 counts, the district attorney said, well, you know, how many life sentences can you give a man? You give a life sentence, it's over. Well, from 1986 until 2018, Carlton appealed and appealed and appealed. But his every appeal, you know, he even had a stay of execution at one point, but he was put to death on March 15th, 2018 at 10:33 p.m. at a prison in Jackson, Georgia. Now, we look back through this case and there were people who said that he was innocent. He always said he was innocent, but there were people who said that he was innocent. And there was even one woman who, she left Columbus altogether. She was friends with these women who were murdered and she lived close to them. And she said that she was certain it was the gardener. But that was never tried. It was never taken seriously. So she left the country. She moved to Mexico because she was afraid for her life because she had pointed the finger at that man. But then, after he died, she came back. So now we have all these players. Carlton Gregory's dead. The other man who the lady suspected, he's dead. All these women, they're dead. And what do we have to show for it? There's no motive. There was no motive. This was a dark time in Columbus's history. And you can think, you know, maybe they were under a lot of pressure to put somebody away. They were. Carlton Gregory had a hard childhood. He grew up, he had a rough life. But you know, that doesn't really matter when you're talking about what we're talking about. All that we can do is be kind to others. Be kind to each other. And life is precious. I don't know if that's good enough, but for me, it's gonna be. Where Tony's at?